Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum viewers. Muhammad Nazim with you again, and today this is my 21st lecture with you. I'm quite hopeful and I'm quite certain that you are gaining confidence and gradually you are picking up what we all want you to pick up. That is, you must have started practicing what improves your communication skills and what improves your ability to interact with people around you. In my last lecture, I talked to you another important aspect of a competent speaker. Whereas a speaker has to develop the abilities and the skills to transfer the knowledge, to impart the information, to persuade, to interact competently and skillfully with the subject matter, what he or she over a span of time has collected, condensed, purified, researched, and with a creative intention tries to persuade, convince the audience. There is one important aspect which I told you ultimately decides whether a speaker has been effective or not. That part, I said, is important in the sense that audience as well wants to take part in the interaction, in the communication which the speaker establishes with the audience. And that's what I emphasized in my last lecture that was concerning handling questions and answers. I told you that an effective and a skillful speaker has to learn the art to field questions and comments, in some cases objections. A speaker who becomes aggravated, who becomes nervous, who becomes frustrated, who loses confidence, becomes nervous, loses the whole presentation. Because this is, of course, the last element in an effective speech. But that is where the audience judges the patience and the skills of a speaker. And that's why I have stressed so much on it, and even my today's lecture is a continuation of the previous, that is, how to effectively handle questions and comments. If you remember, I said that a speaker has to anticipate, answer, incorporate, that is, revise and rehearse. The way you did work on your whole speech, the way you formatted it, you anticipated the text. Likewise, you also anticipated the possible questions, and you prepared for yourself for effective, convincing answers. This is what you really have to work on. Of course, it is never sure. You are never certain how would you be reacted upon by the audience. But if you have the past experience, and if you are sufficiently worked upon, if you have anticipated, and you have gathered information from your colleagues, from your peers, from your seniors, then you certainly can, to quite an extent, prepare yourself well in advance to know the answers for the possible questions. Remember, I also told you that when is the appropriate time to open the floor for inviting questions and comments from the audience. And I took up two important things. One, you could do that in the beginning, before you really start the presentation, and the second one, I said, at the end. Of course, I told you, starting in the beginning was a difficult one, but then I told you how could you convert it into into your benefit by starting and opening up and getting the viewpoints from the people, from the audience. You can smartly get a feedback from the audience and put the points on the whiteboard or the flip chart, and then later on tell the audience that you already incorporated that into your speech. Likewise, I told you that you can allocate time at the end of your speech and then handle it skillfully, one by one, entertaining questions from the people. Today, I'm going to tell you the third aspect. That means you can also open up the floor during the presentation. That is, while you are making the presentation, sometimes during the presentation, you can open the floor and ask the audience for their feedback. But this requires certain conditions. One, there has to be a proper setting for it. Setting in the sense that you can't possibly invite participation if it's a luncheon meeting or if it's a meeting which is for a very brief period of time. Also, the condition has to be that the presenter, that the speaker is mentally prepared to entertain and he has got sufficient time at his disposal. For 15 minutes of speech, you cannot open the forum in between and entertain questions, because it will disturb your whole speech. You need to have skills to properly adjust to the various questions you would be fielded. And of course, you would be fielding, and at the same time, various comments which perhaps would not fit into your text. Where is the position when you can really apply such an exercise? Supposing you have got a one-day seminar or a 3 days workshop, that is where you can really open up the forum and ask the people to participate. So, applying this technique of asking the audience to give their input during the presentation could be effective only when you have got sufficient time at your disposal. But there are certain disadvantages. One, it interrupts the orderly pattern of your speech. Because adjusting to the various questions, then you have to see that the main points you have developed really link up with the points raised by the audience. Secondly, it would consume a lot of time, and you have to control your presentation. You have to see that you properly end your speech at the time allocated or given to the audience. And also, it doesn't disturb your agenda. And you should be having a complete control on your presentation. Mind it, sometimes when you open up this forum during the presentation, then there might be one or two people simultaneously entering into an argument. In that case, you have to very skillfully tell them, well, I appreciate, but because of the paucity of time, limitation of the time, I cannot entertain you, or maybe during the interval, during the break, I will certainly be entertaining your question, giving you in details, but for the timing, I appreciate that's a good point you have brought up. So like that, very skillfully. But this is what I want to tell you, that this is the third way that you can entertain questions during your presentation. Now that you have done, open the forum, let's see how to respond to these verbal feedbacks. Look, you have decided, you know, you have mentally prepared yourself for the possible questions that might come from the floor. And you have decided for the time, whether before the presentation, during or after. Now let's see how to respond to these feedbacks. For that, one has to be really very skillful in the art of communication. That is, the same thing which I tell you in the beginning, must be well aware of two very important aspects. That is, receiving and sending the message. You see, it keeps on recurring, coming back to you what I said in the principle of communication. Look, feedback involves 4 steps: listening, discerning, affirming, and answering. The first 2 parts, listening and discerning, is the receiving part. You listen and you discern. You are a listener. If you are an active listener, you can fairly judge that what is coming to you. And then affirming and answering. This is the response part. Let's take it one by one. Let's talk about the listening aspect. Now, when I say that a speaker has to listen attentively, I mean that sometimes the questions which are coming from the audience, which surface from people, are in a very confused fashion. They themselves are not clear, but it is up to the speaker to sift through the information which is receiving from the audience and try to find out, pick up the essence, and see what clarification is needed and why is there a misunderstanding or confusion in the mind of the one or the member of the audience. So it is up to the speaker that if he or she is listening attentively, would make out even if the question is confusing. So listening attentively, the speaker can help the audience. The platform behavior of the speaker would indicate if the speaker is listening to the audience attentively or not. Now, how should a speaker behave while he or she is entertaining a question? The first is that the speaker should focus meaningful eye contact with the one who's raising the question. That is, focusing on the one who raises and making a meaningful eye contact would reflect that the speaker is attentively listening to the question. And while he or she is making an eye contact, should nod, and nod very gently, indicate I am hearing, and then as well could lean gently forward to give an indication that I am attentive. And fourth indication of listening attentively would be giving facial gestures, maybe a gracious smile if the comment is in favor, or if the question is something which is in the form of an objection, then could make a gesture, well, I receive what you say. So these gestures, making these vocal and visual gestures, would indicate that the speaker is listening attentively. But while one is listening attentively, also should concentrate on keywords. You do not have to concentrate on every word which the member of the audience pronounces. Pick up the keywords and then determine whether the question is concrete or conceptual. Because there are two types of people: visionary people, who generally want to have a general, a very broad view of the subject which is under discussion, and then others are detail-oriented. They want concrete answers. So that is for the speaker to decide whether he or she has to give a precise, concrete, or broad general answer. It is also sometimes very beneficial that the speaker paraphrases, that if I could understand you well, is this what you mean by your question? then that clarifies the whole thing, if it's conceptual or if it is concrete. If I understand you well, is this what you mean? So that is how the speaker can indicate, confirm that he or she is listening attentively. Another aspect is discerning. That is, if you are an active listener, you will be able to better discern the nature or intent of the feedback. When I say the nature or intent of the feedback, I mean you have to see whether the question which has been raised has been genuinely asked because the person has not been able to understand, or the intention is to disturb or just to raise an objection for the sake of an objection. It is important that a speaker distinguishes whether the speaker has not been able to clarify the points and the one who has raised wants more explanation. But even if the intent is not fair and the member of the audience has just raised the point for the sake of creating some disturbance or challenging the speaker, then the speaker must keep his or her cool. It is always good to be generous, to be professional, and say, well, I appreciate your point. I know that you need further explanation, but I am tackling it from a different aspect, and this is not what I mean. So discerning the intent, even if it is challenging, you have to be very cool, you have to be very polite. Mind it, your reaction to any one member of the audience is going to have an effect on the whole of the audience, because they will be judging you how professionally you respond. If you become aggressive, if you become frustrated, then the whole audience will react in that way, and your impression would be marred. You will not be behaving in a very professional manner. In order to judge whether the intentions are good, genuine, you have to observe the visual cues, and also you have to observe the vocal cues. Mind it, discerning is related to perception. Both the audience and the speaker, they perceive the things the same way, by watching and by listening. That is, by watching the visual cues and by listening to the vocal cues. So therefore, you have to watch the visual cues and also at the same time listen to the tone of the speech. And there you can judge that whether there's a genuine interest to know about the subject, or it is just for the sake of creating a disturbance or dichotomy in the relationship or the contact between the speaker and the audience. Next step is the affirmation. That for an effective response, you need to affirm the person who raises a question. Affirmation is acknowledgement. It is validation of the person. No matter the person is in agreement with you or not, but it is always polite. It is always good. It leaves a good impression of yourself if you acknowledge the person, even when you are not in disagreement. Mind it, it is not a question of giving disagreement gestures, or being annoyed or being disturbed when something doesn't fall in line with your point of view. But it is good if you say, well, I acknowledge what you say, I understand what you mean, but this is not what I'm talking about at this time. So this is one way of affirming before you answer, which I'm going to take as the next point. But affirming the person who raises a question or makes a comment is important. Also, it is advisable that if you know the audience, if you know the people sitting there, it's very good if you could take the names of the people you know and say, well, you make a good point, Ali. I appreciate you have added to the knowledge what I have tried to share with you. But refrain from overdoing it. You do not have to start acknowledging. By that way, you will be opening up Pandora's box, and then you will be having lots of questions if you start picking up names of the persons present in the audience. Now, how to answer the questions? You have reached a stage where you have received lots of questions. You have to know how to answer them. You can answer the questions by being clear, correct, concise, and well considered. When I say you have to be clear, I mean to say you do not have to use jargons. Sometimes you would simply be required to say, yes, I agree with you. That's exactly what I mean. So, small, brief, concrete, pithy answers. That suffice. You don't have to elaborate on it. Some questions will simply be clear forward. When we talk about the correct answers, I mean, if somebody asks you, how much would it cost? Then be very clear. And when I say be very correct, I mean ethically correct. You can't say it will cost you 100 rupees, whereas it would be 100 rupees plus sales tax plus postal services or transport charges. If such is the situation, be correct and give the final figure with everything inclusive. That's what I mean. Answering, be very correct. Sometimes you will see that answering correctly, you might annoy some people. But let me tell you one thing. People appreciate the integrity and honesty of a speaker. They might not be in agreement with you, but they will appreciate. भाई वो बात तो उसने ठीक ही की. अगरचे मैं उसकी बात से एग्री नहीं करता, लेकिन बात ठीक करता है. लिहाजा करेक्ट बात कीजिए करें, जो कि आप महसूस करें कि यही करेक्ट है. Third aspect is concise. When I say concise, I mean you have to judge the situation and also judge that what is expected. कोई आपसे अगर ये पूछे कि where did you get this thing from? You can simply say, I got it from such and such place. But if you say, अरे इसके लिए मैंने बड़ी कोशिश की, मैंने बहुत रिसर्च की, I went to the websites, फिर उसके बाद मैं दुकान फिरा, then I consulted people, and ultimately I wasn't sure what to do. There's so many brands in the market, and ultimately I found this. No need. To the point, concise. Often people in the meetings do that. I'll tell you that mind it, be very conscious of the time. And that's why you have to be very concise while answering the questions. When I say that you have to answer the question by considering the situation, I mean you have to keep in mind the people who are present there. What is the situation? What are the expectations? Occasion क्या है? Political है, social है, कोई एक lighter entertainment की gathering है. अगर आपने किसी के question के ऊपर, if you have started dwelling very long, you have taken longer than expected, then people will be put off. So consider the situation. Consider the nature of the question, whether it warrants brief answer or a detailed. So that is your judgment. And consider that and then answer the question according to what your judgment tells you. Now, let's look at the nature of the questions. अब देखिए, gradually I'm going into the nitty-gritties. I'm going into detail, small, minute details, so that you could have a well concept and good impression of, good judgment as well, कि आपने किस सिचुएशन को कैसे हैंडल करना है. नेचर ऑफ द क्वेश्चंस आपको उसके टाइप और कंटेंट से पता चलेगा. क्वेश्चंस कैन बी वेरी सिंपल, क्वेश्चंस कैन बी कॉम्पोजिट, और उसके कंटेंट्स फैक्चुअल हो सकते हैं और वो उनके अंदर फीलिंग्स भी इन्वॉल्व हो सकते हैं. सिंपल क्वेश्चंस, हाउ मच वुड इट कॉस्ट मी? सिंपल आंसर. डू यू हैव अ बैकअप फैसिलिटी? सिंपल आंसर, yes or no. आफ्टर सेल सर्विसेज हैं? सिंपल क्वेश्चंस. लेकिन कुछ कॉम्पोजिट क्वेश्चंस होते हैं जो कि मुख्तलिफ टाइप्स के होते हैं. कॉम्पोजिट क्वेश्चंस कैसे? अगर मुझसे या कोई पूछे हाउ टू हैंडल हॉस्टाइल ऑडियंस, apparently it may sound a simple question. It is not. It's a composite question. हॉस्टाइल ऑडियंस को कैसे हैंडल करना है? कई एस्पेक्ट्स हैं. उनको अवॉइड करें, उनको स्नब कर दें, पोलाइटली आप उनको उनके क्वेश्चंस को रीफ्रेज कर दें और जवाब दें वगैरह. डिफरेंट एस्पेक्ट्स हैं. इट्स अ कॉम्पोजिट क्वेश्चन. एक कॉम्पोजिट क्वेश्चन ये भी हो सकता है कि इफ आई से एज अ लीडर what are your thoughts on strategic development, employees motivation and setting ethical standards? क्वेश्चन एक है लीडरशिप के ऊपर, एस्पेक्ट्स कितने हैं इसके, राइट? इट्स अ कॉम्पोजिट क्वेश्चन. इसका सिंपल जवाब नहीं होगा, लिहाजा इस क्वेश्चन को आपको डिफरेंट तरीके से हैंडल करना होगा. बाज कॉम्पोजिट क्वेश्चंस आर वेरी कंफ्यूजिंग. Like if somebody says to me that I use a slide, a picture as a starting slide in place of a humor for grabbing the audience, but it makes them laugh, and when I start my presentation and I expect the audience to be in a serious mood, do you think this is the right sort of I start showing them a slide of a cartoon or something like that? Now, this is a very confusing question. Simply put, that what is the best way of using a humorous slide as a grabber? So, composite question ऐसे भी हैं कि जो कि speaker को confuse करते हैं. The best way to handle such questions is asking them to clarify it, or you paraphrase it. मैंने आपको पहले भी एक बात बताई थी कि there could be some questions आपके जवाब आपके पास नहीं होंगे. Don't try to answer those questions because that is going to affect your credibility. Tell them, I'm sorry, I do not have the answer. I'll go back, I'll collect the facts, and I'll come back to you through telephone or email, etc. Talking about the contents, could be factual contents. That is, when I'm just talking about something factual, like how much is it going to cost me? It's factual. There's nothing I can be sort of confusing the person about. But other questions which involve feelings, what do you say about the present management system in this institution? Now, it's a question of the opinion. It's a question of your views. Mind it. Be very careful when you are fielding questions regarding feelings. It could be a political question, it could be an ethnic question, it could be a religious question. Try to avoid. Don't enter into controversies. In a business presentation, you should not touch upon these things. Also, at the same time, let me tell you, if somebody asks you, what do you think? How would your boss feel about it? Then the best answer is, I'm very thankful to you that you are concerned about it, but I cannot tell you about his feelings. A very plausible and a polite answer. Never ever touch upon your own feelings. Don't say, I feel, I think. This as well becomes very personal. Rather, we say, my experience in this field for so many years, tells me. My career has told me this thing. So, good way of answering such questions which involve the feelings. Now, let us look at the various types of comments you could come across. One, that at times you will come across comments where you will see that people are in agreement with you. They will say, well, I completely endorse what you say, and I know exactly that the product what you are selling is the best product in the market. That the person is in agreement. Question arises, why would a member of the audience say that? It's because people want to be heard. People want to be acknowledged. Or they want to help you, support you in your cause. So, the best answer is, thank you very much. No more than that. Don't dwell on that thing because it doesn't require more detailed answer. Just say, thank you, I appreciate. Next is the addition. You may come across comments where people could say to you, well, you know, you have told us that we can make a good saving by modernizing our laboratory. But I believe if we could introduce the same system in our marketing system, it could as well save us a lot of revenue. That is, people are adding to what you are saying. Then, again, answer should be, oh, I appreciate. I think that you have got a very plausible reason for introducing it to other department. No more than that. Now the crucial part, objections. You might come across objections from people which might put you off. How to react. This is the crucial part. This is where it's a test of your nerves. Now keep in mind that it is often misunderstood that objections or the comments which may apparently appear to be objections are not objections in the true sense. Disagreement or disapproval doesn't mean that people are objecting to you. I hope you understand. When I say disagreement or disapproval, doesn't mean objections. That is, people may not have understood you well. People may have a different experience. People might have a different point of view. They are only looking from a different perspective. In such a situation, be generous. Don't show any tempers. Don't get annoyed. Don't feel that you are being questioned or people are trying to obstruct. No, acknowledge it, because such objections are an indication that people are concerned and people are listening to you attentively. Now, 3 appropriate responses to objections are: 1, that you agree. If the objection is genuine and you have failed to cover that in your speech, and you think that the point raised is a valid point and it does not contradict with your text, appreciate. Say that you agree. Tell the person, I agree with you, and I think I should have looked at that point from this angle, from this perspective. Second way of handling an objection is reapproach. If you find that the comment or the objection raised is not valid, then reapproach it. Change the approach, rephrase it, and say, let's look at it from a different perspective. Okay? The reason why you need it, that mind it, there are some people who raise objections for the sake of creating disturbance, and you have to handle them very carefully. So if you reapproach it and tell them, well, that's your point of view, and I know that's one way of looking at it. If you reapproach what the person has said, then you will give it a different perspective, a different angle, and that's how you can tackle. But never ever say that I do not agree with you. Do not say that you are wrong. Say that is one angle of looking at it, but another point of view is this. Don't say you are wrong. Be positive. Last is arbitrate. Here is another approach. That is, this approach of arbitration is feel, felt, and found. Now, I am going to tell you a technique of how using feel, felt, and found, you can very intelligently face a question which is an objection and you want to maintain your point of view. Now, if somebody raises an objection or a question, then you can say, well, I know how you feel. I know what you feel. But in my past experience, facing similar question, I have found this. Whatever the situation. You understand? First, that I know what you feel. You acknowledge it. And then you say that the person I came across who was feeling exactly the same way felt what you're feeling, and I found it. I'm going to give you an example. Supposing a salesman is giving a presentation to a team of managers and telling them that I have got a state-of-art equipment which is going to increase the productivity, modernize your plant. And he comes up with a beautiful presentation telling them that if you install this system, these are the advantages. And the final analysis, the final end, if the plant manager says, oh, I like your idea, I am really impressed, but the thing is, it is going to cost us a lot, and we can't afford it. Very plausible comment. Now, how to apply this feel, felt, and found formula? You can say, well, I know what you feel. I appreciate. But I had a similar presentation to one of your competitors, and they felt the same way. See? I've used the word felt. They felt it the same way. This is the third party. Okay? Arbitration, because in order to disagree, I have brought in a third party. They felt the same way, but then ultimately when they incorporated the system, they found that they had a substantial raise in the revenue because the quality of the stuff was much better. It created a lot of good competition, and they had an edge on the other products. And they ultimately found that that was a good choice. So that's how you have tackled a complex problem, a disagreement, and made them realize by giving an example. Let me give you another very practical example which we are facing these days. If I have to give a motivational speech to a group of youngsters, and if I tell them that to wear helmets while you are driving your motorbike, and I encounter a question and they say, no, you know, it is very difficult because it's so hot and we can't, you don't know what we feel wearing this. My approach would be, yes, I know what you feel wearing these helmets in this hot weather. But you know, I encountered the same problem when I was talking to a team of workers. They also felt the same way when we told them to wear hard hats, especially working under the conditions where there were lots of pipes around and there were lots of construction going around the area where they're working. Ultimately, when they finally found that it was useful for them, when one of their colleagues died because of head injury. Now here is, I have given them a very good example of what you feel, how those people felt, and ultimately what they found. Now, this is what I was trying to emphasize, that the way to respond. But sometimes you may encounter situations when there's a lot of disturbance. How to respond? When you face such a situation, then that's a test of your leadership. Because you are being looked at by the audience. You are virtually playing the role of a leader. And whatever you demonstrate, if you get flustered, if you get nervous by any disruption, you're going to aggravate the situation. You're yourself going to aggravate the situation. So, what you really have to demonstrate when there is a disruption, remain calm. Don't lose your patience. Don't lose your temper. Apparently, give the cues that you have got very cool nerves, you are in complete command of the situation and you can handle it. Don't get nervous, don't get upset. Second is, you are the one who has to take action. And you have to decide when is the appropriate time to take action. The action is good. Whatever your experience, whatever your judgment tells, but you have to take action according to the intensity, according to the degree of the disruption, which will demand, which will warrant taking appropriate actions. And then you have to show flexibility. Flexibility in the sense, sometimes you have to alter and make adjustments which might alter the whole what you had viewed. You might have to alter your speech, cut down the time. You might face a very limited audience than what you had expected. In that situation, you have to be very flexible, you have to be adaptable, and then show the leadership qualities and be complete in command and control of the situation. Let's look at the disruptive incidents. Now, when there is a disruptive incident, then what are the tactics you can employ to handle those? Supposing I was supposed to make a presentation at one of the places, say in a hall, and a day before when I was to make a presentation, I got the news that there has been some major disturbance, some major breakdown in that hall, and I cannot make a presentation there. Then, what is the best solution? To change, to detour. Detour, make an alternate arrangement. When I know that my audience is there, they would be coming, I can always make an alternate arrangement and invite the people at a different place. Finding an alternate way of convening and making a presentation, interacting, that comes into tow. Delay. Supposing while you are making a presentation and there's a disruption, then suppose it's a power failure. It doesn't mean that you completely just stop your presentation and wait for the electricity to come back. No. You can use that time appropriately by opening up question and answer session and asking the audience, let's discuss, let's see what you have heard and what are your feelings on the subject which has been covered so far. So delay can be very appropriately used. Or you can use some humor to divert the attention of the audience. So you can use that, that incident in your advantage and fairly interact in a way that the audience doesn't realize that there has been a disruption. But if the disruption is serious, it calls for a very major decision, you can dismiss. You have got no choice. And that is where you have to say, call that off. Let's look at the behavior element. Why do people create mischief, or why do people try to create, a rumpus, or annoy, or object, or intervene repeatedly. Keep in mind that there are always people in the audience who want to be noticed. The intention behind the people who disrupt the meeting is that they want to be noticed. Just like a child who shows temper tantrums in order to gain the attention of the parents. बच्चा जब जिद करता है, और वो जिद इसीलिए करता है कि वो माँ बाप की अटेंशन चाहता है, और जब माँ बाप की अटेंशन उसे मिल जाती है तो वो फिर खामोश हो जाता है. तो कुछ लोग मीटिंग्स के अंदर उनकी एक ही हैबिट होती है, दे वांट टू रेज क्वेश्चंस whether the question is appropriate or not. This is the basic psychology behind that. Some people really want to raise questions, and you have to be well aware of it. Why? Why do people behave like that? First, that is resistance to change. Mind it, I told you that an effective speaker, a skillful speaker, can really change the belief system. You are there to persuade people, and you are there to introduce new ideas. You are there to share new information. You want to introduce new procedures. You want to introduce new policies. But some people are resistant to that. They do not want to see a change. They want to maintain the same sort of a policy or system what is prevalent. So therefore, some people are resistant, and that's what you have to keep in mind, and they create disturbance so that you may not be a very effective person in order to change the belief system or the tradition what is prevalent in that very environment. So that is the one philosophical thing you have to keep in mind. Second is the resentment. Resentment is that when you are making a presentation, then you are showing your leadership skills. You are in a commanding position. You are showing some attributes which are very appealing, and which may be having greater influence on the people whom you are at. And there might be people around who somehow get very concerned that an outsider has come as an intruder, and he or she is trying to leave an impact. They resent the presence of a person and making an impact or trying to influence. The resentment is another element which make people try to create disturbance or resort to such behavior. Repeating successful behavior. If I know that I have always been successful, I have always been recognized, I have always been, in a way, winning position by creating disturbance, raising objections, and I got my way always in every situation, then I will keep on doing it unless and until I fail in my ultimate objective. So my past experience of getting everything according to my wish and will encourage me to resort to such a disruptive behavior. Now, how to deal with such a behavior? First, be courteous. As I said to you throughout my presentation, under no circumstances that you should lose your temper, because your finesse, your professionalism should be the hallmark of your being a good speaker. If you are courteous and even you accommodate people who challenge you, you will leave a positive impact on the audience. While you are confronting a question which is not agreeable, you still courteously answer it in a fashion accepting or saying that you are handling it, approaching it from a different angle. But never, in no circumstances, lose temper. If you do that, then it's going to have a ripple effect, and people in the audience will have a negative impression. Don't ever lose temper. Always be courteous in trying situations or in situations which are favorable to you. Second, you must exercise control. You are the one who is in the commanding position. You are the leader. You are making the presentation. And your platform behavior should demonstrate that you are in complete control. Even if there is a major disruption around, but you have to keep your composure. You have to keep your cool and exercise control. You have to decide when to dismiss the meeting, when to say, well, we can have a break. Not that somebody in the audience decides or requests you that this is not the appropriate time to continue on with the presentation. So you must be in completely command and control of the situation. In certain situations, in very dire circumstances, when you see that there is no other way out than to confront the person who is repeatedly disturbing, then you have got no choice but to confront the person who is trying to disturb your meeting. When a person persists in being disruptive, the speaker can very intelligently disperse the meeting for a very short interval of time and make a refreshment break. And during that interval, the speaker, along with the organizers, can settle with that person and either ask that person to leave or to tell the person to behave properly. Otherwise, if the break is not announced, it is advisable that the presenter request the person to behave and not to disrupt the meeting in the interest of the audience. Once you use that plea in the interest of the audience, then you will see a positive response from the audience, and they would turn against that person who is trying to disrupt the meeting. Or you can ask the person with a focused intention that, look here, I know that you want to know more about this subject, but since I've got a very limited time, I can meet you individually after my presentation and we'll give you more information and answer your questions. But for the time being, I don't think the points which you are raising is related to my subject or topic. That is how you can very intelligently handle a person. So a speaker has at one stage decide to confront that person and, not being very impolite, request that person to behave properly. So in my lecture today, I would sum up by saying that all what I have focused in the way of handling questions and comments and people who try to disrupt your meeting, I would like that you keep in mind the various techniques which could be very helpful to you when you encounter such a situation. I, in my final words, would like to request you once again that go back to my last lecture and keep in mind the salient feature, the main points which I mentioned to you today, and develop the skills and develop the techniques how to handle the questions and comments, and also the people who may try to disrupt your presentation. I hope you enjoyed. I'll be with you again next time. Thank you very much. Khuda Hafiz.